The alarm clock buzzed at exactly 0600 hours on Kepler Station. Commander Jake Morrison rolled out of his small bed and looked out the window at the stars spinning slowly past. He had been living on this space station for 3 years now, teaching combat tactics to alien students who thought they knew everything about war. Jake walked to his small bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. His reflection showed a man in his 40s with gray hair starting to show at his temples. 3 scars ran across his left cheek from a battle long ago. His eyes were the kind that had seen too much fighting and too much death. The human quarters were smaller than those given to other species. The station builders assumed humans needed less space. They were wrong about many things when it came to humans, but Jake never complained. He was lucky to be here at all. At 0630, Jake made his way to the faculty dining hall. The corridors of Kepler Station were wide and tall, built for species much larger than humans. The Kethron warriors stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick, gray skin and 4 arms. The Asthari looked like walking crystals with sharp edges that caught the light. The Mordani could change their shape like liquid, flowing from one form to another. Jake sat alone at a small table with his breakfast. The other teachers rarely talked to him, not because they disliked him, but because they did not understand him. Humans were new to the galactic community. Most species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only been doing it for 50. Professor Zethkar approached Jake's table. The Velthari looked like a tall, thin bird, with blue feathers and 4 eyes. He was one of the most respected military minds in the galaxy. "Good morning, Commander Morrison," Zethkar said in his clicking voice. "Morning, Professor," Jake replied, taking a bite of his synthetic eggs. "I wanted to inform you about the Academy Council's decision yesterday," Zethkar continued. "We have decided that human students will not participate in this year's war games." Jake stopped eating and looked up. "Any particular reason?" Zethkar shifted uncomfortably. "The Council believes it would be unfair. Human military technology is quite primitive compared to other species. Your students would be at a severe disadvantage." "I see," Jake said quietly. "It is for their own good," Zethkar added quickly. "We do not want them to be embarrassed or hurt. The war games can be quite intense." Jake nodded slowly. "Of course. Wouldn't want anyone to get embarrassed." Zethkar missed the sarcasm in Jake's voice. "Exactly. I am glad you understand. I hope there are no hard feelings." "None at all," Jake said, returning to his breakfast. After Zethkar left, Jake sat alone with his thoughts. The war games were the biggest event at the Academy. Students from every species competed to show who had the best military minds. Winners went on to command fleets and armies across the galaxy. Losers still gained respect for trying. But humans were banned. Too primitive, too weak, too embarrassing to watch. Jake finished his breakfast and walked to his first class of the day. He taught basic combat tactics to first-year students. Most of them were young aliens who had never seen real fighting. They learned about war from books and simulations. His classroom was smaller than others, designed for human-sized students. But today, like most days, it was nearly empty. Only 3 students sat in the seats, 2 humans and 1 Mordani, who seemed curious about human fighting methods. "Today we will discuss defensive positions," Jake began. "Who can tell me the most important factor in holding a defensive line?" One of the human students, a young woman named Katie Barnes, raised her hand. "Superior firepower, sir?" "Good guess, but no," Jake replied. "Anyone else?" The Mordani student, who called himself Blue when in humanoid form, spoke up. "Supply lines? You cannot fight without ammunition and food." "Also important, but still not the answer I am looking for," Jake said. The other human student, a man named Pete Collins, thought for a moment. "Morale, sir? The will to keep fighting?" Jake smiled. "Exactly right, Pete. You can have the best weapons and all the supplies in the galaxy, but if your soldiers do not want to fight, they will not hold the line." Blue shifted colors slightly, which meant he was thinking hard. "But Commander Morrison, how do you maintain morale when the situation is hopeless, when your enemy outnumbers you greatly?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. That depends on who you are fighting for and what you are fighting to protect. Down the hall, Professor Zethkar was teaching his advanced warfare class to a room full of alien students. The amphitheater held over 200 cadets from every species in the galaxy. They were the best and brightest of their generation. Today we will discuss the recent Academy Council decision, Zethkar announced. As you know, human students have been excluded from this year's war games. A young Asthari named Vextha raised one crystalline arm. Professor, is it true that humans still use primitive projectile weapons? Zethkar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Yes, that is correct. While most species have moved to energy weapons, humans still prefer to throw small pieces of metal at their enemies. The class erupted in laughter. The sound echoed off the walls like breaking glass. Furthermore, Zethkar continued, human military doctrine has not evolved much from their early tribal warfare. They still believe in concepts like honor and sacrifice that more advanced species have moved beyond. A Kethron student named Groktar spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. Professor, if humans are so primitive, how did they join the galactic community? An excellent question, Zethkar replied. Humans were invited to join after they defeated a small pirate fleet that was threatening one of our trade routes. However, this was likely more luck than skill. The pirates were poorly equipped and caught off guard. More laughter filled the room. The truth is, Zethkar said, humans are simply too fragile and too backward to compete with proper military species. The war games would be a massacre, and not in their favor. Unknown to the class, Jake Morrison stood quietly at the back of the amphitheater. He had been invited to observe, as faculty sometimes did with each other's classes. His face showed no emotion as he listened to the alien students mock his species. A Mordani student named Flux spoke next. Professor, I have heard that humans have very short lifespans compared to other species. Perhaps this makes them reckless in combat. An interesting theory, Zethkar said. It is true that humans live much shorter lives than most of us. This may indeed cause them to take foolish risks that longer-lived species would avoid. Like animals, Vextha added with amusement. Jake's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained silent. In any case, Zethkar concluded, the council made the right decision. It would not be fair to allow humans to compete against species with thousands of years of military evolution. It would be like asking a child to fight a warrior. As the class ended and students filed out, many of them continued to make jokes about human military capabilities. They laughed about primitive weapons and tribal tactics. They wondered aloud how such a backward species had ever made it to the stars. Jake waited until the amphitheater was empty before approaching Professor Zethkar. Interesting lecture, Jake said calmly. Zethkar turned, his feathers ruffling with surprise. Commander Morrison, I did not see you there. I noticed, Jake replied. You make some fascinating points about human military doctrine. I hope I did not offend, Zethkar said quickly. I was simply explaining the council's reasoning. Jake nodded slowly. Of course, just explaining. The decision really is for the best, Zethkar continued. Humans would not enjoy being defeated so thoroughly in front of the entire academy. You are probably right, Jake said. Humans do not like to lose. Exactly, Zethkar agreed, missing the undertone in Jake's voice. Jake started to leave, then paused at the door. Professor, have you ever actually seen humans fight? Zethkar's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. I have read reports, of course, military analyses and tactical reviews. But you have never seen actual footage of humans in combat? Well, no. Such recordings are quite rare and usually classified. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that should change. He left the amphitheater, leaving Zethkar puzzled by the conversation. That evening, Jake sat in his quarters staring out at the stars. He thought about the young alien students laughing at human military capabilities. He thought about their jokes and their certainty that humans were too primitive to matter. They had no idea what they were talking about. Jake opened his personal computer and began typing a message to his old friend Admiral Susan Grant back on Earth. He had a favor to ask. 3 days passed quietly on Kepler Station. Jake Morrison continued teaching his small classes while the alien students prepared excitedly for the war games. Everywhere he went, Jake heard whispers and jokes about primitive human tactics and outdated weapons. On Thursday morning, Jake received a message on his personal computer. It came from Admiral Susan Grant on Earth, encoded with military encryption. Jake read it twice, then deleted it from his system. A small smile crossed his face for the first time in weeks. That afternoon, Professor Zethkar announced to his advanced warfare class that he had prepared something special for them. "Students, I have obtained rare footage from the Terran military archives," Zethkar said, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Today you will see actual humans in combat. This will help you understand why the Academy Council made the correct decision about the war games." The amphitheater buzzed with excitement. 200 alien students leaned forward in their seats. They expected to see clumsy human soldiers stumbling around with primitive weapons, probably losing badly to whatever enemy they faced. Vextha, the young Asthari who had made jokes about human weapons, clicked his crystalline fingers together. "Professor, will we see them use their projectile weapons?" "Indeed you will," Zethkar replied. "You will witness the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where humans faced the Zarathi horde. It was considered their most significant military engagement." Blue, the Mordani student from Jake's class, shifted colors to show curiosity. "How many humans were involved in this battle?" "According to the records, 30,000 human soldiers and 47 ships," Zethkar answered. Groktar, the massive Kethron warrior, rumbled with amusement. 47 ships? That is barely a patrol fleet." "Wait until you see what they faced," Zethkar said, activating the large display screen. The footage began with a human woman in military uniform standing in what looked like a ship's briefing room. The quality was good, but the technology around her seemed old and bulky compared to modern galactic standards. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes, commanding the 3rd Marine Battalion," the woman said to a room full of human officers. "Intelligence reports show 3 million Zarathi ships approaching the Proxima system." A shocked silence fell over the alien students. 3 million ships against 47 seemed impossible. "Earth Command has classified Proxima as expendable," Hayes continued calmly. "We are not expected to hold the system. However, we are ordered to make the enemy pay for every inch." The human officers in the footage nodded grimly. None of them looked surprised or afraid. They looked determined. Flux, another Mordani student, whispered to his neighbor, 3 million against 47. They should have evacuated immediately." On screen, the briefing continued. A human man with captain's insignia spoke up. "Colonel, what are our rules of engagement?" Hayes looked directly into the camera. "There are no rules, Captain Sullivan. We fight until we win, or until there are none of us left to fight," the alien students murmured among themselves. This did not sound like proper military protocol. Where were the strategic withdrawal plans, the negotiation options, the surrender conditions? The scene changed to show the inside of a human fighter craft. Captain Rick Sullivan sat in the pilot's seat, talking to his squadron over the radio. Through his cockpit window, the students could see space filled with more ships than they had ever imagined possible. "Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader," Sullivan said into his microphone. "We are outnumbered approximately 64,000 to 1. I would say the odds are almost fair." Some of the human pilots laughed over the radio. The alien students looked at each other in confusion. How could anyone laugh at such terrible odds? "Remember, people," Sullivan continued, "we are not here to die for our country. We are here to make the other guy die for his." The human fighters launched toward the Zarathi fleet. The aliens watching expected to see the small human ships immediately destroyed by the overwhelming enemy numbers. Instead, something else happened. The human fighters did not try to avoid the enemy ships. They flew straight into the largest groups of Zarathi vessels, firing their primitive projectile weapons continuously. When their ammunition ran out, they rammed their ships directly into enemy targets. "Why are they doing that?" Vexitha asked, his crystalline body flickering with shock. They are throwing their lives away. On screen, Captain Sullivan's fighter took heavy damage from multiple Zarathi ships. His cockpit was on fire and his left arm hung useless at his side. Instead of retreating, he flew his burning ship directly into a Zarathi command vessel, 10 times larger than his fighter. "Blue leader to all units," Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio. "Target acquired. See you in hell, boys." His ship exploded against the enemy vessel, destroying both in a massive fireball. Professor Zethkar paused the footage. "As you can see, human tactics are indeed quite primitive. They appear to believe that dying in battle is somehow useful." But the students were not laughing anymore. They stared at the frozen image of the explosion with something approaching awe. "Professor," Blue asked quietly, "did that human pilot choose to crash his ship?" "It appears so, yes," Zethkar replied. "Quite wasteful, really. A proper military would have withdrawn to fight another day." The footage resumed, showing the battle from the perspective of the human fleet command. General Nancy Walsh stood on the bridge of a ship called the UES Guardian, calmly giving orders as explosions lit up the space around them. "Colonel Davis, take your Marines and board that Zarathi dreadnought," Walsh ordered. "Sergeant Rodriguez, hold Corridor 7 at all costs. Captain Chen, ram the enemy flagship on my mark." Each order was acknowledged immediately. No one questioned. No one hesitated. The humans fought like they had been designed for war. The students watched Marine Sergeant Tony Rodriguez defending a corridor inside a human ship. Waves of Zarathi soldiers attacked his position. Rodriguez had been shot multiple times and was bleeding heavily, but he kept fighting. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he pulled out a knife. When the knife broke, he used his bare hands. "How is he still alive?" Groktar asked. The Kethron warrior was considered one of the toughest species in the galaxy, but even he looked impressed. Rodriguez fought for 18 minutes against impossible odds. The footage showed him strangling a Zarathi warrior with his bare hands, while 3 more enemies shot him in the back. He killed them too before finally collapsing. But other Marines immediately took his place. They stepped over Rodriguez's body and continued fighting. No one stopped to mourn. No one retreated. "This is not normal military behavior," Flux observed. "They fight like they do not care if they die." "That is exactly the problem," Zethkar said. "Humans have no sense of proper tactical withdrawal. They waste lives unnecessarily." On screen, the battle continued. The students watched human ships explode one after another, each taking multiple enemy vessels with them. They saw Marine units fighting to the last soldier, never giving ground even when surrounded. Colonel Ben Carter commanded a human ship called the UES Defiance. Enemy fire had destroyed most of his vessel, and his crew was down to 12 people. Instead of surrendering, Carter ordered his ship to ram the largest Zarathi vessel in the enemy fleet. "Engineering, overload the reactor core," Carter commanded. "All hands, prepare for manual detonation." His crew acknowledged the order without question. The alien students watched in amazement as 12 humans calmly prepared to die in order to destroy one enemy ship. "Tell Earth we held the line," Carter said into his radio as his ship accelerated toward the Zarathi flagship. The explosion when the UES Defiance hit was visible across the entire battle zone. The massive Zarathi command ship broke apart, taking thousands of enemy fighters with it. But what shocked the alien students most was what happened next. Instead of being horrified by Carter's sacrifice, the other human ships seemed inspired by it. "Their attacks became even more fierce. They are getting stronger," Blue whispered. "The more of them that die, the harder the survivors fight." It was true. As the human fleet was reduced from 47 ships to 30, then to 20, then to 15, the remaining vessels fought with increasing desperation and skill. They used tactics that no military academy taught. They turned every loss into a weapon against the enemy. General Walsh's ship, the UES Guardian, took a direct hit that killed half her crew. She promoted a sergeant to colonel on the spot and kept fighting. When her weapon systems failed, she ordered her ship to be used as a shield for the remaining human vessels. "All ships execute Protocol 7, Walsh commanded. The alien students had never heard of Protocol 7. They watched as the surviving human ships formed a defensive pattern around the most damaged vessels, using their own hulls to absorb enemy fire. What is Protocol 7? Vextha asked. Zethkar checked his notes. I am not certain. It does not appear in any standard military manual. On screen, the human ships began a coordinated suicide attack. Each vessel flew directly into the largest group of enemy ships it could find. The explosions created massive debris fields that trapped and destroyed even more Zarathi vessels. The students watched in stunned silence as 12 human ships somehow managed to eliminate thousands of enemy vessels through this tactic. They are winning, Groktar said in disbelief. The silence in Professor Zethkar's classroom stretched for several long minutes. 200 alien students sat frozen in their seats, staring at the black screen where moments before they had watched humans accomplish the impossible. Vextha, the young Asthari who had laughed about human weapons just days earlier, was the first to speak. His crystalline voice shook slightly. Professor, can we see more of the battle footage? Zethkar's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. He had expected his students to laugh at the primitive human tactics. Instead, they looked disturbed and fascinated. I suppose we could examine more of the engagement, for educational purposes. He activated the screen again. This time the footage showed the battle from inside one of the human ships. The students could see human crew members working at their stations while explosions rocked their vessel. A young human woman sat at a weapons control station. Her name tag read, Petty Officer Janet Cruz. Blood ran down her face from a head wound, but she kept firing the ship's guns at enemy targets. When her station exploded and threw her across the room, she crawled back and kept working. Why does she not go to the medical bay? Blue asked, shifting colors to show confusion. On screen, Cruz spoke to someone off camera. I can still see the targets, sir. I can still pull the trigger, that is all that matters. A piece of metal from another explosion cut deep into her shoulder. She pulled it out, threw it aside, and returned to her weapons controls. The alien. Students watched her work for another 10 minutes before she finally collapsed from blood loss. But immediately another human took her place. A cook from the ship's kitchen sat down at the weapons station and began firing at enemy ships. He had no training on the weapons system, but he learned by watching and kept shooting. They do not have specialized roles, Groktar observed. Every human seems able to do every job. That is highly inefficient, Flux commented. Proper military organization requires specialists. Professor Zethkar paused the footage. An excellent observation, Flux. This is another example of primitive human military thinking. They waste time training every soldier to do multiple jobs instead of focusing on specialization. But Silwyn, a quiet Mordani student, raised a tentacle. Professor, if their weapons specialist dies, they do not need to wait for a replacement. Any human can take over immediately. Zethkar had not considered this. Well, yes, but it is still inefficient under normal circumstances. These do not appear to be normal circumstances, Blue pointed out. The footage resumed, showing more scenes from inside human ships. The students watched a human engineer named Bill Santos working to repair a damaged engine while the ship was under heavy fire. An explosion broke his left leg, but he kept working. When another blast knocked him unconscious, he woke up 5 minutes later and continued the repairs. I have 3 kids back on Earth, Santos said into his radio while tightening bolts with bloody hands. This engine is going to work because they need their daddy to come home. The students had never heard a soldier talk about personal motivation during combat. In most galactic militaries, soldiers fought for honor, duty, or species glory, but humans seemed to fight for very personal reasons. The scene changed to show Marine Captain Laura Davis leading her troops through the corridors of a damaged human ship. Zarathi boarders had broken through the hull in several places. Davis's mission was to stop them from reaching the bridge. Listen up, Marines, Davis said to her squad. We have got ugly aliens trying to take our ship. I do not know about you, but I take that personally. Her Marines laughed despite the danger. The alien students could not understand why humans found humor in desperate situations. Davis led her squad into battle against overwhelming odds. The Zarathi soldiers were larger, stronger, and better armed. But the humans fought with a ferocity that made up for their disadvantages. When Davis ran out of ammunition for her rifle, she used it as a club. When the rifle broke, she pulled out a pistol. When the pistol was empty, she drew a knife. When the knife broke, she used her bare hands. The students watched her strangle a Zarathi warrior twice her size, while 2 more enemies shot her in the back. She killed those 2 as well before falling to her knees. "Medic," one of her Marines called out. "Negative," Davis replied, blood foaming at her lips. "Keep fighting. That is an order." She died still trying to crawl toward the next group of enemy soldiers. But her death did not demoralize her Marines. Instead, it seemed to make them angrier. They fought even harder, shouting her name as they charged into the next battle. "They use death as motivation," Vextha whispered. "When their comrades die, they become more dangerous, not less." The footage showed this pattern repeating throughout the battle. Every human death made the survivors fight with increased desperation. Every loss became fuel for greater violence. The students watched Colonel Frank Miller defending a critical section of his ship, with only 12 Marines against hundreds of Zarathi boarders. When the enemy overwhelmed his position, Miller made a decision that shocked the watching aliens. "All units, this is Colonel Miller," he said into his radio. "I am detonating the charges in Section 7. Clear the area immediately." His own Marines. "We're still fighting in Section 7. "Sir, we can still hold this position," one of his Marines replied over the radio. "Negative, son. The ship is more important than any of us. You have 30 seconds to get clear." The alien students watched, in horror as Miller calmly counted down from 30, while his own Marines tried desperately to reach safety. Most of them did not make it. The explosion killed Miller, his Marines, and 300 Zarathi boarders. It also sealed the breach in the ship's hull and saved the lives of 5,000 other humans. "He killed his own soldiers," Blue said, in shock. "No," Groktar corrected. "He sacrificed them." And they understood. Listen to their radio calls. The Kethron warrior was right. In the final moments before the explosion, the trapped Marines were not cursing their colonel or begging for their lives. They were confirming targets and reporting enemy positions. "Section 7 clear, sir," came the last transmission. "Good. Hunting, Colonel." Professor Zethkar stopped the footage again. His feathers were ruffled with agitation. "This is exactly what I mean about primitive human tactics. They waste lives unnecessarily. No rational military leader makes such decisions." "But it worked," Silwyn pointed out. "The ship survived. 5,000 humans lived because 12 died." "The mathematics are sound," Flux agreed. 12 lives for 5,000 is an efficient exchange." Zethkar struggled to respond. But proper military doctrine teaches that all lives have value. You do not simply throw away your soldiers." "The humans do not throw them away," Blue observed. "They invest them, like currency. They spend lives to buy victory." This concept disturbed the alien students deeply. Most galactic species viewed death in battle as a failure of planning or leadership, but humans seemed to view it as a tool, something to be used wisely but without hesitation. The footage resumed with scenes from the human flagship. General Nancy Walsh stood in her command center, calmly directing the battle while her ship took massive damage around her. Explosions rocked the bridge, but she never flinched. "Admiral Torres, take your squadron and ram the enemy formation at Grid 7. Walsh ordered. "Acknowledged, General," came the reply. "It has been an honor serving with you." The students watched. Admiral Torres lead 15 human ships in a coordinated suicide attack against a much larger Zarathi formation. Every human ship was destroyed, but they took out over 2,000 enemy vessels in the process. Walsh watched the explosions on her screen with no visible emotion. Then she turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to Earth Command," she said. "Tell them we have broken the enemy's main battle line. We will pursue and destroy the remaining forces." "Ma'am, we only have 8 functional ships remaining," her aide pointed out. "Then we will make those 8 ships count for 80, Walsh replied. The alien students began to understand something that chilled them to their cores. The humans were not fighting a defensive battle. Despite being outnumbered thousands to 1, despite losing most of their fleet, they were hunting the enemy. The footage showed the final phase of the battle. The 8 surviving human ships chased down the fleeing Zarathi vessels. They used tactics that no military academy taught, turning their damaged ships into weapons. Captain Steve Taylor commanded a ship so badly damaged it could barely move. Instead of retreating for repairs, he used his ship as bait to lure enemy vessels into range of his few remaining weapons. "This is Captain Taylor to all Zarathi ships," he broadcast on an open channel. "I am alone, defenseless, and ready to surrender. Please approach slowly so we can discuss terms." The alien students watched dozens of Zarathi ships surround Taylor's vessel. Then Taylor activated every explosive device on his ship simultaneously. The blast was so powerful it created a chain reaction that destroyed every Zarathi vessel within 50 kilometers. Taylor's last transmission was heard clearly across the battlefield. "Surrender this." "They lie to their enemies," Vextha observed. "They use deception as a weapon." "They use everything as a weapon," Groktar corrected. "Their own ships, their own lives, even their own deaths." The final scene showed General Walsh standing alone on the bridge of her burning flagship. Jake Morrison stood at the front of the classroom, looking out at 200 alien faces that stared back at him with new understanding. The laughter and jokes about primitive human tactics had died completely. Now there was only silence and growing fear. "You want to know what Protocol 7 really means?" Jake asked quietly. "Let me show you." He activated the screen again, but this time he entered his own access codes. The footage that appeared was different from what Professor Zethkar had shown. This came directly from the classified military archives that only senior human officers could access. "This is the complete battle record," Jake explained. "What you saw before was edited for non-human audiences. Your professor showed you the clean version." The new footage began with the same scene of Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes briefing her officers. But this time, the students could hear the complete conversation. "Intelligence reports 3 million Zarathi ships," Hayes said. "Earth Command expects us to die here, but dying is not our mission. Our mission is to make sure the Zarathi never threaten another human world." A captain raised his hand. "Ma'am, what exactly are our orders regarding survivors?" Hayes looked directly into the camera. "There will be no Zarathi survivors. None. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of equipment must be destroyed completely. If we cannot capture them, we kill them. If we cannot kill them, we die killing them." The alien students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not standard military doctrine for any species they knew. "Furthermore," Hayes continued, "this battle is being recorded for training purposes. Future human soldiers will study how we fight and die here. We are not just fighting for Proxima Centauri. We are teaching the next generation how to wage total war." Jake paused the footage. "You see, the battle you watched was not just a military engagement, it was a lesson. Every human death, every sacrifice, every tactical decision was being recorded so other humans could learn from it." Blue, the Mordani student, changed colors rapidly. "You mean humans study death the way other species study mathematics? We study everything that makes us more effective at war," Jake replied. "Death, pain, fear, sacrifice. We turn all of it into tactical advantages." The footage resumed, showing scenes the alien students had not seen before. This time, they watched human soldiers preparing for battle by recording personal messages. Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, the Marine who had defended the corridor for 18 minutes, sat in front of a camera before the battle began. "Maria, if you are watching this, it means I did not make it home," Rodriguez said to the camera. "I want you to know that I died, protecting you and the kids. Tell Tommy and Elena that Daddy was not afraid. Tell them that humans do not surrender." Dozens of similar messages followed. Human soldiers saying goodbye to families, giving final instructions to loved ones, and promising that their deaths would serve a purpose. "They plan to die," Vextha whispered. "They actually plan for their own deaths." "Not plan to die," Jake corrected. "Plan to die effectively. Every human soldier knows that death is possible. We train for it, we prepare for it, and when it comes, we make sure it counts." The footage showed Captain Rick Sullivan, the fighter pilot who had rammed his ship into the enemy command vessel. But this time the students could see what happened before his sacrifice. Sullivan's fighter had been damaged in the first wave of the attack. His engines were failing and his weapons were nearly empty. Instead of retreating, he called his wingman. Blue 2, this is Blue Leader. My bird is finished, but I can still fly for about 3 minutes. Mark that command ship at grid 4. Blue, Leader, you cannot reach that target and survive, his wingman replied. I am not planning to survive, Sullivan said calmly. I am planning to take that command ship with me. Calculate the best approach vector. His wingman did not argue or try to talk him out of it. Instead, he provided tactical support to help Sullivan die as efficiently as possible. Sir, recommend approach from grid 47. You will face less defensive fire. Acknowledged. Blue 2, after I am gone, take command of the squadron. And remember, we are not trying to survive this battle. We are trying to win it. The alien students watched Sullivan spend his final 3 minutes of life planning the most effective way to die. He calculated angles, velocities, and impact points with the same precision other species used for routine maneuvers. They treat death like engineering, Flux observed, like building a machine. Because that is exactly what it is, Jake replied. Every human death in battle is a weapon designed to kill as many enemies as possible. The footage continued with more examples. The students saw Colonel Frank Miller, who had blown up his own Marines to save his ship, but this time they heard his conversation with those Marines before the explosion. Sir, we understand the situation, Sergeant Kelly O'Brien had said over the radio. We can hold for exactly 28 seconds after you trigger the charges. That should be enough time to take out the Zarathi command unit. Confirmed, Sergeant. Make those 28 seconds count. Yes, sir. It has been an honor serving under you. The honor was mine, Sergeant. See you on the other side. The explosion that followed was not a desperate last resort. It was a carefully planned tactical maneuver executed by soldiers who understood exactly what they were doing and why. Professor Zethkar struggled to speak. Commander Morrison, this suggests that humans view death in battle as normal, even desirable. Not desirable, Jake said. Necessary and useful. Let me show you something else. He changed the footage to show the aftermath of the battle. The students expected to see human survivors mourning their losses or celebrating their victory. Instead, they saw something much more disturbing. The 1,200 humans who survived the Battle of Proxima Centauri immediately began analyzing every aspect of the engagement. They studied video recordings of their comrades' deaths, looking for ways to improve tactics and kill more efficiently. Sergeant Cruz held her position for 11 minutes after being wounded, one analyst said. Next time, we should have medical stimulants available to extend that to 15 minutes. Captain Sullivan's ramming attack destroyed one command ship. If we modify our fighter designs to carry larger explosive charges, one pilot could take out 2 or 3 enemy vessels. The survivors were not traumatized by watching their friends die. They were taking notes on how to die better. They learn from death, Silwen whispered. They study it like we study star maps. Now you are beginning to understand, Jake said. Every human battle makes us better at war. Every death teaches us something new. We do not just fight wars, we evolve through them. The footage showed General Walsh in her final moments. The students had seen her ram her ship into the last Zarathi vessel, but they had not heard her final transmission. All units. This is General Walsh. I am about to demonstrate ramming attack pattern 7. Study this approach, learn from it, and next time, do it better. She flew her burning ship into the enemy with textbook precision, her destruction captured from multiple angles for future analysis. Jake switched to a different recording. This one showed the debriefing sessions held after the battle. Human officers analyzed every mistake, every success, every innovation that had emerged during the fighting. The Zarathis showed weakness when faced with coordinated suicide attacks. One officer reported, "They have no defense against enemies who do not fear death." Recommendation: all future engagements should include planned sacrifice units. Volunteers only, but we should train specific teams for maximum impact death scenarios. Motion approved. We need soldiers who specialize in dying effectively. The alien students sat in horrified silence. They were witnessing a species that had industrialized death, turning sacrifice into science. You see, Jake continued, what you witnessed at Proxima Centauri was not an unusual battle for humans. It was training. We sent 30,000 soldiers to learn how to fight an enemy that outnumbered them overwhelmingly. Most of them died, but the 1,200 survivors returned to Earth with knowledge that no other species has ever possessed. He activated another file. This is footage from the Second Zarathi War, fought 18 months later. The new recording showed human forces engaging a Zarathi fleet twice the size of the one at Proxima Centauri. But this time, the humans had only 5,000 soldiers and 20 ships. The alien students watched in amazement as those 20 human ships systematically destroyed 6 million Zarathi vessels in less than 4 hours. The tactics they used were based directly on lessons learned from the previous battle. How is this possible? Blue asked. 20 ships against 6 million? Because those 20 ships were crewed by humans who had studied death itself, Jake replied. They knew exactly how to use their lives for maximum effect. Every sacrifice was calculated. Every death was optimized. The footage showed human ships executing the perfect suicide attacks, following patterns developed from analyzing previous battles. They moved like a machine designed for mutual destruction, each ship's death precisely timed to set up the next attack. After the Second Zarathi War, there were no more Zarathi, Jake said quietly. We did not just defeat them, we studied them, learned their weaknesses, and then we erased them from existence. Vextha's crystalline body flickered with fear. The amphitheater remained silent for what felt like hours. 200 alien students sat motionless in their seats, staring at Jake Morrison with expressions of fear and newfound respect. The human instructor stood calmly at the front of the room, waiting for someone to speak. Finally, Vextha, the young Asthari who had started this whole discussion by mocking human weapons, raised a trembling, crystalline hand. Commander Morrison, he said in a voice barely above a whisper. Are there more recordings like these? Jake nodded slowly. The Terran military archives contain footage from over 300 major engagements. 47 different species have threatened human colonies or trade routes over the past century. And those species? Blue asked, already knowing the answer. Do not exist anymore, Jake replied matter-of-factly. Some surrendered after the first battle and were relocated to distant systems. Most chose to keep fighting. The alien students exchanged glances filled with terror. They were beginning to understand that the human sitting quietly in their classes for 3 years was not just a teacher. He was a survivor of wars that had erased entire civilizations. Professor Zethkar struggled to find his voice. Commander, surely these recordings show humanity at its worst. In desperate situations against hostile enemies? Jake tilted his head thoughtfully. Professor, these recordings show humanity on a Tuesday afternoon. The battles you watched were not desperate, last stands. They were routine military operations. He activated the screen one more time. New footage appeared showing human soldiers in what looked like a peaceful setting. They were training on a planet with blue skies and green fields. This is the human military academy on Mars, Jake explained. Every human soldier trains here before deployment. Watch what they learn. The footage showed young human recruits, barely out of their teenage years, learning basic combat tactics, but what they were learning shocked the alien students. An instructor stood before a class of human cadets. Today we will practice sacrifice scenarios. Remember, your death is a weapon. Use it wisely. The human students nodded and took notes, as if they were learning mathematics. Cadet Johnson, you are alone and surrounded by 50 enemy soldiers. Your weapon is damaged. What do you do? A young human woman raised her hand. Sir, I would detonate my emergency charges to take out as many enemies as possible while providing cover for my squad's advance. Correct, Cadet Williams, same scenario. But you have no explosives, a young man replied immediately. I would engage the enemy in close combat, drawing their attention and ammunition while my squad mates flanked their position. My death would create the distraction they need. Excellent. Remember, cadets, there is no such thing as a meaningless death. Every human life, properly spent, can change the outcome of a battle. The alien students watched human teenagers learning how to die effectively. They saw instructors teaching optimal sacrifice techniques and cadets practicing suicide tactics with the same enthusiasm other species showed for sports. This is how all human soldiers are trained? Flux asked in horror. This is basic education, Jake confirmed. Advanced courses teach more sophisticated techniques. The footage continued, showing human cadets learning to calculate the exact amount of explosive needed to destroy different types of enemy vessels. They studied anatomy charts of various alien species to learn the most efficient ways to kill them in hand-to-hand combat. They practiced fighting while wounded, dying while useful. Every human soldier understands that their primary weapon is not their gun or their ship, Jake explained. Their primary weapon is their willingness to die for a purpose. A new scene showed human cadets in a simulation chamber. They were practicing something called Protocol Omega. The alien students watched as human soldiers learned to coordinate mass sacrifice attacks where entire units would die simultaneously to achieve specific tactical objectives. The goal is not to survive, the human instructor in the footage explained. The goal is to win. Survival is secondary. Victory is everything. Silwen, the quiet, more downy student, shifted colors rapidly. Commander Morrison, does every human soldier volunteer for these missions? There are no volunteers, Jake replied. Because everyone volunteers. When humans join the military, they accept that their life belongs to humanity's survival. Personal survival becomes irrelevant. The U.S. footage showed graduation day at the Human Military Academy. Thousands of young humans stood in perfect formation, taking an oath that chilled the alien students to their cores. I swear to use my life as a weapon against humanity's enemies, they recited in unison. I will not seek personal glory. I will not fear death. I will not surrender. I will not retreat. I will fight until I win, or until I die winning. The ceremony ended with families celebrating as their children received assignments to military units across the galaxy. Parents hugged, sons and daughters knowing they might never see them again, but proud that their children would die protecting humanity. They are happy, Groktar observed in amazement. Human families are happy to send their children to certain death. Because they understand what is at stake, Jake said. Human parents would rather have dead heroes than living cowards. We teach our children that some things are more important than personal survival. Professor Zethkar finally found the courage to ask the question that all the alien students were thinking. Commander Morrison, what would happen if the Academy Council decided to allow humans in the war games after all? Jake was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. Professor, the war games are designed to test military strategy and tactical thinking in a controlled environment. Teams compete to achieve objectives within established rules and parameters. He paused, looking around the room at the frightened alien faces. Humans do not understand rules when it comes to warfare. We understand only victory and defeat. If you put human students in your war games, they will not try to score points or demonstrate clever tactics. What would they do? Vextha asked, though he already feared the answer. They would try to completely destroy every other team, Jake replied simply. Permanently, they would turn a training exercise into actual warfare. The alien students sat in stunned silence, imagining human cadets treating the prestigious war games as a real battle. They pictured human teams fighting to literally eliminate their opponents rather than simply outscore them. The Academy Council was right to ban us, Jake continued. Not because we are too weak to compete, but because we do not know how to compete. We only know how to win. Blue changed colors to show deep confusion. But Commander Morrison, if humans are so dangerous, why did the galactic community invite your species to join? Jake smiled, and for the first time it was not a cold or threatening expression. Because, despite everything you have seen today, humans are not monsters. We are protectors. He activated the screen one final time. This footage was different from all the others. It showed human ships arriving at a colony world under attack by pirates. But instead of the brutal warfare the students expected to see, they watched something else entirely. Human soldiers evacuated alien civilians to safety. Human medics treated wounded aliens alongside their own people. Human engineers rebuilt destroyed infrastructure without being asked. Every species that has become humanity's ally has learned the same lesson you learned today, Jake explained. We are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, but we are also the most loyal friends. The footage showed human soldiers dying to protect alien civilians they had never met before. It showed human doctors working for days without rest to save alien children. It showed human engineers rebuilding entire cities destroyed by war. You see, humanity learned long ago that the best way to avoid having to kill someone is to give them a very good reason to never threaten you in the first place. Jake gestured to the alien students sitting before him. Every species in this room enjoys the protection of human military forces. Your trade routes are safe because human ships patrol them. Your colonies are secure because human soldiers guard them. Your children sleep peacefully because human warriors stand watch. The truth of his words sank in slowly. The alien students realized that while they had been mocking human military capabilities, human forces had been protecting their worlds and their families. But, Jake continued, his voice becoming serious again, that protection comes with an understanding. As long as you are humanity's friends, we will die to protect you. But if you ever become humanity's enemies, he did not need to finish the sentence. The students had seen enough footage to understand what happened to humanity's enemies. Bextha spoke for all of them when he asked, Commander Morrison, how do we make sure we remain humanity's friends? Jake's answer was simple and direct. Do not threaten human civilians, do not attack human colonies, do not start wars you cannot finish. And remember that every human you see around you is someone who has sworn to die rather than let harm come to the people they protect. The young Asthari's crystalline body flickered with understanding. The Academy Council banned humans from the war games to protect us from learning what we learned today. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Some knowledge is dangerous. Now you know why humans do not play war games. We do not practice warfare for entertainment or competition.